This is northern Canada in November of 1930. Out here, the geography is defined by millions of square miles of dense, snow-covered pine forest, where temperatures routinely drop to levels that can kill a human being in minutes. On the shores of Anjikuni Lake, a small community of about 200 people lived in almost total isolation. These were the Anjikuni Eskimos, a group that lived entirely off the grid, relying on traditional fishing and hunting, with no connection to modern technology. Joe LaBelle was a professional trapper who spent his life navigating this terrain. In the winter of 1930, he was pushing through the wilderness in search of shelter, as a particularly brutal cold snap settled over the region. LaBelle headed toward the Anjikuni settlement, expecting the usual greeting: the sound of sled dogs, the smell of wood smoke, and people moving between their tents. In this part of the world, community is a biological necessity. In sub-zero temperatures, the group provides the warmth, labor, and shared resources that make survival possible. When LaBelle finally reached the village perimeter, he found himself standing in total silence. The signs of life he relied on were gone. There were no dogs barking to signal a stranger's arrival, no voices from the dwellings, and no fires visible through the dark. LaBelle walked into the center of the camp and began checking the tents. They were all empty. Every man, woman, and child had vanished. Leaving the safety of a shelter to face the Arctic night without gear is a death sentence. The idea that an entire population would simultaneously walk into the dark contradicts every established instinct of northern survival. LaBelle searched the tents for a reason for the evacuation. Inside, he found fires that had only recently burned out. In several dwellings, pots of food were still hanging over the cold ashes, left behind in the middle of being cooked. This diagram shows the settlement's layout. The tribe's sled dogs were found starved to death, tethered to the perimeter, meaning they hadn't left on a planned trip. Furthermore, LaBelle checked the surrounding snow. It was entirely undisturbed. Not a single footprint led away from camp. He found one more detail at the edge of the settlement. The tribe's ancestral graves had been dug up. The frozen ground was hollowed out, and the bodies that had previously been buried there were completely missing. The state of the village suggested a community that intended to stay, with meals in progress and dogs at the ready, yet every living soul had disappeared, without leaving a single track in the snow. LaBelle reported his findings to the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, who launched a 3-week search of the surrounding region. This teletype record reflects the official dead end the investigation reached. Investigators looked for signs of a raid or a massacre, but there were no signs of a struggle, no blood, and no tracks from an outside group. Despite the massive search effort, the Mounties found no bodies and no scattered supplies. 200 people had simply ceased to exist in the eyes of the law. When an official investigation cannot reconcile the physical evidence with a known human behavior, the case stalls. The file was eventually closed, filed away as an unexplained event. This case sits in a space where standard forensic logic fails to provide a bridge between the evidence and a conclusion. A similar event occurred 30 years earlier at the Flannan Isles Lighthouse in Scotland. There, 3 experienced lighthouse keepers vanished from their post without warning. The scenes shared the same characteristics: an island left in perfect working order, half-eaten meals on the table, and logbooks that didn't match the actual weather conditions. When the physical facts of a case refuse to form a coherent story, we naturally begin to look for answers outside our everyday experience. In 1984, researchers Roger and Nigel revisited the Anjikuni disappearance, looking for testimonies that the original investigators might have dismissed as folklore. They found accounts from hunters in nearby territories who claimed to have seen strange, unnatural lights hovering over Anjikuni Lake before the village went silent. Because the 1930 investigation failed to find a terrestrial explanation, these accounts of aerial phenomena became the primary theory for those believing the tribe was taken. Whether the Anjikuni disappearance was an earthly event we don't yet understand, or something more speculative, it remains a rare instance where the record of what happened is far stranger than any theory we can produce to explain it.